Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Food Safety Certifications and GFSI and Leadership Commitment. My name is Amy Wayne. I'm a part of the marketing team here at Perry Johnson Registrar's Food Safety Inc., or FSI. We're excited to be hosting a guest speaker from Safe Food and Route today for the webinar, and I'll be introducing her to you all a little later in the presentation. First, we just wanted to cover a little bit of housekeeping before we actually get to the body of the presentation. All attendees are on mute to ensure call clarity, but we do want to take your questions, absolutely. So please go ahead and type any questions you have into the questions tab near the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel. And just go ahead and submit them as you think of them. We will answer them all at the end of the presentation live, but feel free to submit as many as you want. The biggest question we typically get is regarding the availability of the slides, and yes, they will be available after the webinar from our website at www.pjrfsi.com. We're also recording the session today, and the recording will also be available from our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for PJRFSI or Perry Johnson Registrar's Food Safety, and our channel should be easy to find. So this is what your GoToWebinar panel should look like, something similar. This is an older version in the screenshot. And this is what the question tab should look like if you wanted to submit a question in there. But first, to get us started, we did just want to launch a little poll question for you all to answer. And that question is your organization currently certified to a GFSI standard? Your options are yes, we're certified with PJRFSI, yes, we're certified with another CB, no, we're not yet certified, but we're looking to become certified, or you're not interested in becoming certified. So we'll just leave this open for a few seconds before we move along to introduce our first speaker. But we really just want to get an idea of who's on the webinar today, and how can what we're about to present help you all. So it looks like we've got about 50% reporting, and in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Thank you everyone who responded. And it looks like a majority of you are certified, and that is great. We love to see that you're taking that step to become certified to a GFSI standard. So moving right along, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. This is Paul Demarin. He's the Senior Vice President of Food Safety and Supply Chain here at PJRFSI. Paul joined us just earlier this year in January. He has 35 years of experience in the hospitality, service, and retail agri-food sectors. Before he came to us at PJRFSI, Paul worked for 15 years in the certification industry, working with clients in a huge range of sectors, from food safety and supply chain to brand protection and quality. Paul worked for many years in management system certification as well, and before that, Paul was a professional chef and a consultant for over 20 years working in major hotel chains, restaurants, private golf courses, and food service organizations. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and give access to Paul, and you can take it away.
Great, thank you very much, Amy. I appreciate that intro. Welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for attending today. On behalf of Perry Johnson Food Safety, Jennifer and myself, we really appreciate your time. So before I begin, I just want to give a very short overview of our company. We're all still in really game-changing pandemic mode, and every one of us has been affected. I want you to know that at our organization, we're fully committed to the health and well-being of our staff, our customers, and certainly our communities. We've really seen the effects of COVID-19 in Canada, US, and across the world. But, we've also seen the best in each other as well, which is very good to see. So on behalf of PJRFSI, we want to applaud everyone for doing their part to get us through this unprecedented time, and certainly everybody on the call here today. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. As Amy mentioned, my name is Paul. I'm the SVP for Perry Johnson Registrar's Food Safety Inc., or PJRFSI. I'll just refer to us today as FSI for the sake of time. And as I mentioned, I'm going to give a short overview of our family of companies and talk a little bit about some of our capabilities and reach. I also have the pleasure of welcoming Jennifer Crandall, my colleague in the industry from Safe Food en Route. And Jennifer is going to share the stage with us and speak to you about some important topics in our industry related to GFSI. So moving on, let's just start to talk about Perry Johnson as a company. We were originally founded in 1994 by Perry L. Johnson, and we've really been at the forefront of the certification and registration industry from the very beginning. After originally achieving the ANAB certification and accreditation after our creation in '95, our first venture into the international market came in 1999 with the expansion into the Japanese and Brazilian markets. PGLA is our laboratory accreditation business, which was also founded in '99, and in early 2000 would see further growth overseas in Germany, Portugal, Spain, Latin America, Thailand. During that time, we also attained UCAS accreditation, and in more recent years, we broadened our international horizons, moving into the United Kingdom and China. In 2005, PJNA, was founded as a healthcare technology company that specializes in transcription, medical coding, telemedicine, and virtual scribing services. And then shortly after that is when FSI was born, which was really out of a result for demand in the industry to have third-party certification to many food safety and quality schemes. We're headquartered in Troy, Michigan, but we're really a global company and part of a family of companies in the registration, testing, and certification areas. So we have global offices all around the world, and we do have a wide range of certification and inspection services, everything from HACCP to GFSI to organic, gluten-free, cannabis, hemp, social responsibility standards like SMETA and SA8000, CTPAT, and even FDA audits. We work with companies essentially in every sector across production, processing, distribution, and even disposal industries. Today, we work with many retailers, processors, importers and exporters, distribution companies, etc., and we help them manage their food safety, the supply chain and the risk associated with that, as well as quality and brand protection requirements. So we're really committed to adding value to our clients through our food safety certification approach and helping them to manage and mitigate risk within their supply chain. So the entire team here really believes that consistency is paramount, and during your audit activities, which leads then to higher levels of customer satisfaction and end user satisfaction. We're recognized as the #1 registrar in the Americas by the IAAR, which is the International Association of Accredited Registrars. And as I mentioned, we operate globally, but we think regionally. You know, as Amy mentioned, I was a chef for 20 years, and in my opinion, there is a real difference between customer service and customer focus. Everybody here at Perry Johnson Food Safety and our family of companies is focused on the focus part of it and not necessarily just service. This helps us to uphold the highest standards of professionalism, technical competence, and integrity throughout the process. So as Perry Johnson himself did over 30 years ago, we apply the principles of quality management, collaboration, and organizational excellence in really all of our office and field activities. And of course, we comply with the requirements that are set forth by the international standards organizations, accreditation bodies, and scheme owners. Currently, we have over 460 auditors in 60 countries who understand not only the regulations of those countries, but the language and equally important, the culture of these countries. So we've also, in the last 5 years, maintained a customer satisfaction of 9.5 out of 10, which is very good and we're very proud of. So moving forward, as the slide points out, certification industry has been deemed essential, but why? Well, really because if you think about it, it gives food safety certification. It's based on the results of tests, inspections, and audits, and it gives confidence to you and me as the consumer because the organization's products or systems are being thoroughly evaluated against international accepted standards by a competent third party. Now, of course, we know today is not business as usual, far from it. And there's several changes that are required to not only your business, but our business and how we run during this time to ensure that we continue to provide a high quality service for you, and we do our part to minimize the impact of COVID. So we don't take this lightly here. We're using every recommended precaution in our business today. Our goal is to ultimately reduce and eliminate the direct physical interaction that could promote transmission of the virus. In today's market, this is really even more critical. The landscape of the industry is constantly changing. It's a dynamic place where trends shift, customer expectations can change in an instant. There are many recalls and regulations still dominating our days out there, and navigating the landscape can be a real challenge for organizations. So we define our services into 4 key areas: auditing and certification to accredited third-party schemes, like what Jennifer is going to speak to you about; second-party auditing, which are pretty much the standards that are owned by us, the certification body. We do a lot of work with customer specific and supply chain audits as well. And then we certainly offer training solutions. So if you take a look at the slide here now, we have over 30 different programs that we currently support. Many different types of audits in the industry. There's accredited, some are unaccredited, some are client specific, government regulated, some are retailer mandated. It's kind of hard to keep up, but we really work with all different types of organizations across multiple standards and schemes. We have essentially 5 main channels that we operate in. I mentioned a little bit about first, second, and third party. Third party being the accredited schemes like GFSI or even ISO 9001 being accredited. Second party, we have standards that we as a certification body have written and developed. That would be, GMP for manufacturing, good distribution practices, HACCP, cannabis and hemp. We're the first certification body to have these accredited, which is big news. Then these standards are really appealing to companies because they know that they're technically vetted and essentially audit ready. If a client has their own audit protocol that they want us to conduct audits for, generally because we have technical expertise and knowledge, we have the location of the auditors, language requirements, minimizing costs. These are all typical reasons why customers would look to outsource that service to a group like ourselves. And then we're also recognized as an accredited body to perform various government audits and inspections, such as FSMA, FSVP, or the VQIP program for the Voluntary Qualified Importer Program. Now, moving on to the FSR side of the house, this is a sample of some of the depth of expertise and standards that we work with every day on the core management side of the business. These are really the standards that started it all. We conduct audits across many schemes for quality, environmental, aerospace, automotive, and many others with respect to supply chain. Now, I like to say, if you think about it, food safety management system certification, although over 10 years old, is really still in its infancy compared to some of the standards that we see here. Many years ago, there was a dramatic shift from individual system audits to combined audits and then integrated audits, where a company would have one integrated management system, and that would usually cover multiple areas of their business, such as an integrated QH&S program. You still don't see that today so much in the food space. FSSC is doing much more of this on an integrated management side than some of the other schemes out there. We see a lot of combination audits, bolt-on audits, but from a truly integrated perspective, we're not quite there yet. So now, moving on, we are with our family of companies, we have long-standing relationships with many of the accreditation bodies and scheme owners. This gives our clients assurance that the family of companies operate under rules of accreditation bodies and scheme owners, which help to regulate us as a certification body. So just to kind of speed up my part here, I want to talk just for a little bit more about COVID. To address the pandemic, we've implemented global procedures and processes when it comes to our business and protecting clients and staff. Many of our clients are reaching out to us on a daily basis, indicating a variety of situations that could impact their ability to have successful audits. Reduced or completely shut down operations. They have a no visitor policy, restrictions on access to certain locations, while others are still accessible, and some, as we know, in the US are starting to open, Canada slowly as well. There's different GFSI policies on the temporary audit measures during COVID-19 pandemic. And currently GFSI is allowing the certificate extension for benchmark schemes of up to 6 months. However, to do that, your certification body, or PJR in this case, would be required to conduct a risk assessment to allow you to move forward with a 6-month extension. So if the determination on the risk is low, then we would extend the certificate. If you want more information, just please feel free to reach out to us on that. Over the last couple of months, as I mentioned, we've fielded many inquiries from our clients about different policies that we've put in place to protect the safety of our employees and yours. We're going through really unprecedented change right now, and hopefully we're going to come on the other side of the curve soon. But there's a lot of uncertainties that we're all facing. So you want to have a partner who understands the current situation, and you, our customer, is the first priority, as well as our employees. So on a daily basis, we're reviewing relevant public health information from CDC and other bodies to provide you the most up-to-date information like we're doing right now. So on top of the basics like staying home if you're sick, sanitizing, everything from your car to your laptop to your hands and even your mobile device, we have clear developed policy in place for all of our employees, and we're doing everything that we can to adhere to these policies. Even if we have our auditors who work for FSI, we mandate that they self-monitor their systems on a daily basis and self-isolate if there's a need for that. We're following recommendations and procedures by groups like the FDA and the CDC and our own policies, but this still doesn't prevent us from getting the virus. So, you have our commitment that we're doing everything in our power to, protect you and keep your brand safe. So now we go to, the technology that we're currently using. We use multiple different types of technology for our virtual and remote audits. We've probably done about 250 audits virtually and remotely since this has started, so we have a lot of capability around that. But we use things like MS Teams or GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar, Zoom to conduct these audits. We would document, record, and review all of your processes and procedures, as well as live interviews with your team to make sure that we're meeting the requirements. And we also have secure sharing platforms that would be used to transfer any documentation as required. So if and when you're ready to discuss that, please do reach out to us. And then just in closing, I wanted to mention that, we have over 30 years, as I mentioned, of experience and expertise. We bring a service, I believe, that adds real value to your business and can create an opportunity to provide not only greater transparency across your operation, but cost effectiveness, improve risk management, and enhance your brand. So on a daily basis, you can find this all on our website. We publish a lot of content and information that you can use to help protect your company. And we like to work very closely with all of our clients as well to make sure that your needs are met. This is a time of great change. We know that. We're only really at the beginning, if you think about it, and we all need to start building our plans for recovery post-COVID-19. This includes a pivot to our business models, our operations, our supplier policies, maybe even offboarding strategies, our technologies, and also remobilizing your workforce. So this is a time of significant change, and now is the time for us to really execute, lay out, and plan how we're going to manage our business moving forward to ensure that we meet the needs of stakeholders, employees, and really instill the confidence in them that we're in control. So with that, I hope this was useful, and now I'm going to pass it back to Amy.
Great, thanks so much, Paul. Yeah, thank you so much. Let's see, we've got coming up now our second polling question. So this second polling question has to do with the struggles being faced with becoming certified to a GFSI audit scheme. So your options include expense and time. Maybe you need more training, you're non-competitive, you need to improve your capital, not ready, just trying to meet minimum requirements with regulations or get HACCP principles in place. No struggles, you're committed already by having the programs in place, or you're already certified, or maybe you're completely unfamiliar with GFSI requirements, or you're not quite sure what you need to expect. So we'll just let some more people participate. Like I said at the very beginning, if you have any questions that you want us to answer at the end, please go ahead and type those in at any time. We will acknowledge and answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. It looks like about half of you have already responded, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like the biggest issue is for those of you who have not already become certified or who have had struggles, it looks like expense and time is the most common response. So thank you all.
Amy, I'm not sure if you were going to post that or not. We didn't actually see the results.
I can do that right now. I thought it clicked, but it did not. All right. So now thanks everyone for participating. And I really wanted to get to introducing our guest speaker today. Our guest today is Jennifer Crandall. She's the CEO and founder of Safe Food en Route. Jennifer has a food science degree from Purdue and has 8 years of manufacturing experience with 12 years at the corporate offices over at Kroger. In 2018, she founded Safe Food en Route and is a U.S. country partner with Primordi Limited. Jennifer and her team are in the food safety consulting space with focus on the FSMA rules. Everyone knows the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSVP, and supplier compliance management. In today's presentation, Jennifer will be sharing with you information about food safety certifications, GFSI benchmarked audit schemes, and what leadership commitment looks like. All right, so it's my pleasure to hand things over to Jennifer, and you can go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, and I really appreciate both Amy and Paul to give such a good lead in to the conversation. Based on the last poll results, I just want to take a minute to kind of acknowledge that the expense and time. So as Amy mentioned, my background, I had 8 years in manufacturing, so I've been in a lot of your shoes. Most of the time that I was in manufacturing was before GFSI requirements were part of a normal everyday routine. The next 12 years was what I spent at Kroger Corporate, and I was a lot of times the person on the other side of the request for asking for your GFSI certificate or your audit report so that I could review it and make sure that people were meeting the requirements for Kroger at that time. And a lot of times what I saw was conversations about how expensive it was and how much time it took to become certified. And in the early stages, and I kind of think we might run into this again, we had an auditor shortage. And there were a lot of companies that couldn't get audited because there was an auditor shortage for GFSI requirements. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. I just wanted to come in and express that I understand some of that struggle, and I definitely can relate from the positions that I've been in my past. So there we go. So first thing I want to talk about is to make sure that we understand that a lot of times the foundational requirements for the food safety audits, no matter what type of audit they are, is usually HACCP based, which we know is the hazard analysis of critical control points. It is defined as a process control system that identifies where hazards might occur in the food production process and puts into place stringent actions to prevent those hazards from occurring. And you know, the USDA has put this into effect since 1996. And most companies that are managed by or that are governed by the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, have been managing their programs with this in mind. But the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, did not have these requirements on every type of company, every type of manufacturing facility out there. So it's really important that we discuss some of the hazard requirements. Most of this is requiring strictly monitoring and controlling each step of the process to, minimize the chances of that hazard from occurring. The FDA, as you are well aware, the Food Safety Modernization Act was put into effect not too long ago, and that is the first time that the FDA has changed the laws in around 70 years. So this is a monumental change that occurred. The main goal for HACCP approach and for a preventive controls plan, or that anything that is falling under the Food Safety Modernization Act, really is looking for proactive prevention. And we'll dive into that a little bit more. Some of that too is the prerequisite program. So things that are required as part of that foundational part of a HACCP plan before it's written. Many of you, it sounded like many of you are already certified under one of the GFSI schemes, so you're very familiar with HACCP and you're very familiar with the type of prerequisite programs that are written into it. And this is the same idea with the Food Safety Modernization Act as well, that you have these types of programs, something like a supplier approval program, incoming materials, finished product specs, etc. And there are so many more if you're familiar with that style of management system, like how do you manage your water, steam, and ice safety if you have a wet plant or you utilize those types of products for your processing. How do you prevent cross-contamination? You know, do you have an environmental swabbing program that helps you monitor that? Do you have hand washing facilities, hand sanitizing? That's all of those are very important right now, obviously during the COVID. Employee health conditions also very important during the pandemic that we are currently in. And then exclusion of pets and training and those types of things. So keep in mind that a majority of these types of audits, these types of programs, all have the same principle behind them, even though they might not have the requirement of HACCP. This is a lot of times the intent of what we are looking for. So moving into some of the regulations, I mentioned the United States Department of Ag, I mentioned the Food and Drug Administration, so we know them affectionately both as USDA, FDA. But I imagine that some of you on the call are also from Canada and maybe from other countries as well. So you might have an equivalent regulatory agency in your country as well. And really the aim in a regulatory audit is to verify that a product is compliant with the regulations and standards. And when you're talking about a food facility or some type of food item facility, which might include packaging suppliers, these regulatory audits are conducted to ensure that we have public safety. And depending on where you're shipping the product to, you're going to make sure you might have different regulation requirements for that type of product. So the Food Safety Modernization Act, as I mentioned, right now there are currently 9 rules. You're probably very familiar with Preventive Controls Rule for human food. And then there is another one for the preventive controls for foods for animals, produce safety rule. And notice that the names of them are a lot longer than I am saying, but I'm calling them by the common name that we use in the industry. You have the intentional adulteration, sanitary transportation rules, and then foreign supplier verification, which, as you mentioned earlier, Amy mentioned, that is one of the focuses of my business for Safe Food en Route. We focus a lot on the FSVP program, and that one is probably one of my favorites. But again, all of these rules, when you look at it, are based, sorry, didn't mean to advance. All of these are based on the idea of a good management program, a good food safety management program, a good supplier compliance management program. There is a heart to all of these. It's still a theme that runs through them of those HACCP principles, making sure that you have good foundational programs and that you are managing your programs appropriately to protect public health. I mentioned there are 9. These are 6 of the 9, and then we have a few that are more on the voluntary side. So accredited third-party certification, voluntary qualified importer program, Paul mentioned that one, and he also mentioned the third-party certification. And then there's also currently one that's being proposed on laboratory accreditation. So these are all coming down the pike or currently being implemented. You can apply for these. They are not a requirement. So they might have a requirement built into them to meet one of the other rules. So like voluntary qualified importer program requires that you have an accredited third-party certification, do part of the audit, and it also requires that you meet the FSVP requirements. So there's some of those things built into these laws. All right, so let's jump into some of the ones that are more associated with what FSI might be doing. Third-party audits. So these types of audits are there to get an unbiased point of view of the facility and their programs with a report to provide to their customers. And oftentimes in my past history, I was going through third-party food safety audits instead of what you are currently going through, most likely, which is one of the GFSI benchmark audit schemes. So I was going through that earlier. Oftentimes, the retailers and large food service distributors would require a form of third party, and that it be conducted to prove that the facility is protecting the brand of that company. And it's very much kind of a private label industry. It's a very common thing in the private label industry, as well as the food service industry. So it covers, as you see the first bullet point, it covers a lot of times GMPs, good manufacturing practices, or GAPs, which are good agricultural practices, and sometimes food safety programs. It also allows the auditor that is conducting the audit to be able to advise or consult as a potential solution for observed nonconformities. And you will note this is very different than what is allowed on a GFSI audit. Also, they may or may not cover HACCP or FSMA rules. It's not always a requirement. It depends on what company you're using and what type of third-party audit is being conducted. And they may or may not have an auditor with the experience in the industry, meaning that if I have a lot of dairy background in my background, so I worked 6 of those 8 years of manufacturing was in dairy manufacturing facilities. I can audit if I were in, conducting an audit. I could go into any facility that I want and do a third-party audit. But because I have dairy background, I might not have as much experience in like a flour mill and understanding the hazards that are associated with that product. You don't have to have that restriction on a third-party audit. And they may or may not, as I mentioned, they may or may not be benchmarked to a GFSI audit criteria. So there's other types of audits. I know that Paul mentioned as well the second party audit, which typically is the type of audit that is conducted by a customer. So a customer like, a large retailer might require that you get a third party food safety audit. They might require that you meet one of those GFSI benchmark audit schemes, but they also may want to conduct their own audit. And those are usually meant to they're conducted by the immediate customer typically, and they usually have those visiting that have liability in selling the product that you are producing, either sharing the brand as private label or conducting it due to product being higher risk to their customers. So like somebody doing a high risk item that is in a regional market, they might send, that company might send somebody into that location to do a little bit more scrutiny on their programs. As I mentioned, the biggest goal is to protect brand liability and their consumers. And then it is also, a lot of times they're looking at other things besides food safety. They're looking at your capacity and your capabilities while they are there. So they want to understand, can you do more production? Are you able to produce something different than what I am purchasing? And then, how many other customers do you have? How much warehouse space do you have? There's a lot of questions that come up into it. And then ultimately it can help build those relationships between you and your customer and help them understand what, maybe enforce some of the policies that they need. Like, I know when I used to work at Kroger, a lot of times we'd come in and make sure that everybody understood in the facility what type of best buy date we wanted on the package and how we wanted it written, and we wanted to see them put that into their system so that we could make sure that they were meeting those requirements that we had. That was then. Things are very different now, so I want to make sure I put a disclaimer out there. I'm not stating what Kroger's policies are at this time. It's just my past history when I was working with them in those roles. Okay, so I believe we're up for another poll question.
That is correct. Let me go ahead and get that up on the screen for everybody. So this next question has to do with senior leadership support in implementation of GFSI programs. So it's on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being no support at all and 5 being full support. This is completely anonymous. Nobody will be able to see what you responded with. So please answer as honestly as you feel, and we'll see where everyone lies. In the meantime, I do just want to remind everybody that the slides and the recording of the presentation will be available after we're done from YouTube and the PJRFSI website. And if you have any questions on stuff that's been presented or even other tangential questions about GFSI standards, please go ahead and drop them right into the questions tab on the GoToWebinar control panel. And it looks like we're at about 50% responding, so get those last votes in, and I'm going to close it in about 5 seconds. Thank you to everyone who's responded so far, and let's close the poll. And it looks like we have a pretty wide spread across the board, surprisingly equal actually. So it looks like, you know, there's some places where things could be improved and others where you're well supported. So that's great to hear. And I'll hand things right back over to you.
Schemes that I mentioned, those 12 that are currently approved, cover those elements in some form or fashion. But what I really want to make sure you understand is, why do retailers like GFSI? And coming out of a large retailer, I mentioned I used to work at Kroger, that the reason that they like it, they all got together, they were part of the process. You know, industry was part of the process of setting these benchmarks for these audit schemes to meet. They like it because it's globally recognized. So globally, all of these people agreed that these are minimum basic requirements. The certificates have meaning. They're not just a score. So those of you that have gone through a third-party food safety audit, the auditor will come in and conduct the audit, and then they'll give you a score. It might be out of 1,000, it might be out of 100, and they give you a percentage and they tell you, okay, here you go. Here's the audit, here's my assessment, this is what I found, and this is what we suggest. You know, they might be able to suggest what you do to correct it, but they, at that point, sever their relationship with you regarding that audit. So when a retailer is reviewing that audit report, they have to dig into it more to understand, what did you do to correct all the findings that they wrote up about you? So the certificate having meaning means that it's not issued until the certified body and the audit scheme owner agree that the corrections that were conducted by the facility are adequate. So if you were written up for, say, that flooring incident, and you don't have, you know, like maybe your floor has cracks in it and it leaves a place for some environmental concerns, and the auditor wrote that up. If you do not correct that and replace the floor or patch it or do something that adequately removes that sanitation concern and that environmental concern, then you won't get the certificate. It comes down to, they are going to withhold the certificate, which means the retailer can trust that the certificate is valid and that you have done something to correct the problems. They might still ask questions. I don't want to act like they're not going to ask questions. They will, most likely, because anytime you read an audit report and you see a trend or see any kind of concern, they still want to know what you did to correct things. But that does not mean that they don't trust the certificate, because they know that you corrected it adequately enough to receive the certificate. The other things that they like about GFSI benchmark audit schemes, that there's an auditor rotation requirement built in. So a lot of times in third-party audits, the same auditor might show up to the facility several times, several years in a row, which might create a bias, where they start wanting to, you know, they start giving you scores, or they already know your history well enough that they start kind of overlooking things. And it's not intentional necessarily, but this helps keep a fresh set of eyes in the facility to make sure that continuous improvement is happening. And again, I mentioned the auditor must have experience in that particular product type, and it's a trusted, qualified individual that has reviewed the programs of that company. So looking into some of the requirements for FSMA, we have to have, especially for Foreign Supplier Verification Program rule, you need to have a qualified individual review programs to make sure that hazards were assessed appropriately. And a GFSI benchmark audit scheme can give some of that assurance, not all of it, and that definitely does not mean that you meet all of the FSVP requirements. But it does help with the assessment process. Okay, so I think we are again at another polling question. Oh no, we switched, and I'm sorry, I didn't change my slide deck. So we already answered the polling question. This was the one leading us into leadership commitment. So I will trudge right on. So let's, just to remind you what the polling results were earlier, 3% of you said that you felt like you had no support. 22% said minimal, 30% said adequate, and 22% good, and 24% on full. So yay for the 46% that feels like they have really good support, 30% on adequate. We'll talk a little bit more. These leadership commitments that I'm getting ready to go through are more in line with what the GFSI standards require, and you'll start to see you know, some of the things that are expected for leadership commitment and demonstration of it. So it's you need to have a food safety culture in-house, and you know, we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. You need to have a vision and a mission that's around leading the team, and that usually includes some type of food safety and quality, a lot of times quality type mission as well. Your people need to be trained. You have consistency in your programs. You have adaptability. So right now is a good example of adaptability because we are in the middle of a pandemic, and this has never happened in most likely anyone's lifetime that is currently working in manufacturing. So being adaptable to this, you have to change your programs. And then understanding the hazards and risks associated with your programs. All right, so let's dive into the mission a little bit. So business structure, values, and purpose, setting direction and expectation, and leadership and messaging. These all can be kind of encompassed in, you know, a mission statement. So a lot of times that's how it's demonstrated, is that you've taken the time to design and think through a mission statement. Your leadership is, their goals are in line with making sure that they have good, safe product going to the customer, that they have designed their business structure to be able to help regulate the product to make sure that it's okay and that it's always meeting specs and always meeting good food safety standards. So a good example, and I'm not saying this is a best practice, but I've seen this in before, where the quality assurance department and who is managing the food safety programs actually is above in the reporting structure. They might be above the operations person. So you might have the plant manager reporting to the QA manager, which is like a flip-flop of the model. A lot of times the QA manager is reporting to the general manager. So that's one example of how you might set up your business structure to show that your leadership is in the right position, and it sends a very clear message to a company and to all the associates that are in the company that they're in line with making sure that they have you know, food safety as their top priority. And that also comes out in the messaging that the leaders might have. All right, so food safety culture. This is, I'm sure many of you, especially I'd be curious to know, and I would never call you out on it, but the people who felt like they had minimal support. In my experience, when I've done second party audits and when I have walked through working as a QA manager, sometimes the companies that I worked for, the managers did not always follow the rules. And so that shared values, beliefs, and norms kind of set this just almost a bad food safety culture, because you had a bad example walking through the facility who would not put on their hairnet, or would not, you know, it might be the owner of the company would not put on their hairnet, or they had a, you know, they might wear bracelets or watches or something where they're always walking through the facility wearing all of it. And that sets a culture, and it sets an example to people on the production floor that they don't care, so why should I care? So those are things to think about in your food safety culture, and how to get the leaders to kind of flip-flop their mindset. And sometimes it takes some pretty stern conversations with the owners to get there. Another one would be like just affecting the mindset, like I mentioned, in the behavior of people. So you might have one bad apple that ruins the batch, and that can happen as well. And it might be the leader, or it might be somebody in the facility who just blatantly ignores the rules and does not care, and you have to deal with that. You have to discipline those kind of people in order to make sure that everybody around them understands that this is not going to be tolerated, because if you have that, they could spoil the entire facility. And you're always thinking about the end consumer or your end customer, depending on the type of products that you're producing, and the safety that is getting affected by these behaviors. It always can affect employee hygiene is one of the #1 reasons we have recalls. So we have to have that in mind whenever we are thinking of leadership commitment and how we are portraying ourselves in our facilities. Consistency is key. This is one of my favorite sayings. I say this all the time in my business as well. Food safety culture, without consistency, it doesn't matter, right? So if somebody's walking through the facility a week from today, even though the auditor is there today, and somebody a week from today is not following the rules, just because they were following the rules during the audit does not mean that that facility is actually doing a great job. Like, you need to be every day of the year making sure that people are held accountable, that their performance is measured, and that you are having some kind of documentation of that. Skipping one. Adaptability. So like I mentioned, COVID is a really good example right now. COVID-19 across the globe, we are having to adjust the way we are managing our facilities. And there's a lot of I'm not going to dare go into all of the different recommendations that are being put out there right now by the FDA and by other entities, but it is good to understand and continuously train your teams to make sure they understand the new expectations in your current state in what's going on, and then having that agility, that ability to do change management very quickly. So rolling out new procedures, posting them everywhere, that is an adaptability. That is demonstration of adaptability. And then you have understanding your hazards and risk awareness. So making sure that there's foundational hazard information available and that you're educating and training your people. So this goes down to some of the things that are covered in a GFSI audit. A lot of time, a benchmark audit. A lot of times they're looking into your HACCP plan and how are you training your people? Do your people know what the critical control point is in your facility? If they don't and they are affecting that critical control point, that could be demonstrating that you're not training them appropriately. So that's one way to make sure that you are informing and educating. So that can roll over into leadership commitment and looking like you are not committed to food safety because you haven't trained the people in the areas that they affect the most. And then verifying the hazard and risk awareness. So, testing them, making sure that they understand the content, because sometimes food safety management systems definitely can be complicated. So it's good to make sure that the people that you're training understand it and that you have good employee engagement in it as well. And again, we talked about people, do you have people in place? Another style of leadership commitment being displayed that I have seen kind of in line with this is, and this was actually a best practice, is the company investing in their people by giving them incentives and rewards. They were measuring their food safety and their quality programs. So they were measuring based on number of deformancies or deficiencies in the production line. And then if they didn't have very many deficiencies, the people who didn't were getting bonuses. So they were doing a way to measure that metric. And it was really, I felt like that was a very good practice, and they were continuously monitoring their lines for that. So that is a good way to look at investing in your people and making sure that they understand that that is a goal of the company, to make sure that you are meeting good food, making good food safety choices, good quality choices. So understanding who the stakeholders are, how you're going to govern it, how to communicate it, what type of learning do you have in your organization? Maybe you need to train them in different languages. Maybe it's not as much of a language concern as just making sure that your material is informational. It has a lot of good quality graphics. It's not 1975 still on the video, which we all have seen that, I'm sure. But those things are boring. So making sure that you're mixing it up and that the companies understand that's good ideas for leaders to take. And then, like I said, the incentives and recognizing people for their good efforts and giving them rewards is important. So just in summary, we talked about the audit types in the beginning. We talked about GFSI benchmark audits and leadership. In summary, these are just some of the key components to all types of audits. The leadership commitment part is definitely a key in that, and especially in GFSI benchmark audit schemes. And you'll see that in your facilities, how important it is. So, if you have questions about overcoming some of that leadership commitment issues for the ones that scored a little bit lower, things to think about that you can do. Many of these principles are in those audit schemes, and GFSI audits, benchmark audits, are marketable for your company. It helps you be able to sell your product to more companies, especially in the private label industry, like I mentioned, because the retailers all require it. This is a minimum standard, and I believe Paul said that earlier in the presentation, that a lot of your customers are requiring this already. So if without good leadership commitment, then you are losing one of the foundational elements of meeting that requirement for your customer and proving that you have proactive and responsible programs, and that will turn into, like I said, great marketability to new and old customers alike. So it justifies the reason for itself. Okay, so that is all I have. I appreciate your attention, and I'll turn it back over to Amy. This is my contact info. If you have any questions or you want to get in touch with me, I'd be happy to talk through anything with you as well.
Great, Jen, thank you so much. We are going to go ahead and move on to our last polling question. I'm sure you guys are itching to get to the Q&A. So go ahead and type those questions in. We're still taking questions, and we're happy to answer as many as you can give us. But our last polling question has to do with our future webinars. So what topics would you most like to see? You can choose as many or as few of these as you'd like. And so go ahead and give us your thoughts. I just want to reiterate again that the recording of the presentation and the slides will both be available online after we're done here. And that's usually up within 24 to 48 hours, depending on how busy our webmaster is. So go ahead and get those votes in on upcoming webinars. And Paul, did you want to start speaking a little bit about upcoming webinars while the poll is populating?
Absolutely, that'd be great. Are you going to put it up on the screen, or do you want me to just speak to it?
Yeah, if you want to just go ahead and give a basic verbal overview.
Sure, no worries. So we have several webinars. Our month of May is very jam-packed with a lot of amazing webinars that are coming up. We have one next week, which I'm also very much looking forward to. We're actually expecting a couple of thousand people on that one, so I'd strongly recommend that you get that on your calendars as soon as possible. It is with a gentleman by the name of Dr. William Lee. He's the President and Medical Director for the Angiogenesis Foundation. He's a New York Times bestseller author. He's wrote the book Eat to Beat Disease, and he's going to be talking about, certainly what we can be putting in our bodies to boost our immunity, lower stress, alleviating fear, and instilling a feeling of control back to you in your workplace. He's also going to touch on, quite interesting, what he feels is really hurting the retailers out there. So we're expecting that to be a big one. We have Dr. John Spink on May 13th, who's going to be speaking to us about everything food fraud, which is quite critical and important, especially in today's market. Then we have Jacqueline Southey from FSSC on May 19th, who's going to be speaking to us about everything FSSC. We'll be talking about what they as a scheme owner are doing to manage COVID-19. She's going to be talking about some of their standards. We're going to be talking a little bit more about what that means to you if you are FSSC certified with the new versions of their standards that they have coming up. And then we're going to be doing a webinar as well with Primus coming up on May 27th. Again, same sort of thing, managing your risk, what they as a scheme owner are doing and mandating to their customers. And we also have another one coming up with SQF, which is going to be with Bob Garfield, the person who oversees that, as well as Leanne Chuboff. And we're going to be speaking again with them as a scheme owner about what they're doing and how it's affecting all of their customers. So that's kind of a high level overview. I hope to see everybody on future ones.
Great, thanks so much. And like Paul mentioned, you can see the link down below the URL to the page that has the full listing of upcoming webinars, and there are links on that page to register for them as well. So let's go ahead and move on into our Q&A session. It looks like we've got a couple questions coming in. First question I think should be going towards Paul here. This one's from Raymond. Raymond asks, when the certificate is extended, does PJRFSI issue a letter or amend the certificate?
Yes, we would do that for you. Happy to provide a letter as well and walk you through any of that. Feel free to give me a call personally offline. Happy to take those calls, but yes, we would do that for you.
Great. And we've got a question regarding the current state of things, obviously with the coronavirus situation from Beth Ann. She is a consultant, but she wonders, in this time of change, how are physical portions of GFSI audit schemes being conducted?
Sorry, can you repeat that last part? How are the which?
How are physical portions of GFSI audits being conducted during the outbreak?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, there's a lot that's going on with that. They've released new documents as well as a part of the scheme document. So it's currently open for public opinion right now. We can definitely add that into our slide here for future reference for people to take a look at. But there's a lot of talk that's currently going on right now around the virtual and remote auditing. The majority of the scheme owners are following the GFSI guidance, where we are allowed to do everything from pre-assessments to stage 1 audits virtually or remotely. I'm working with some other large scheme owner groups who are giving us approval to conduct some of these audits virtually as well, including the certification side of it. But right now it's still kind of up in the air. They're still going through. They realize that there is a large group of individuals across the Americas who know that even once we get past this COVID, I think things are going to be quite a bit different, and they're going to need to, in my opinion, work with all of the stakeholders in the industry to determine how we can move forward with conducting virtual audits for organizations that meet specific criteria. So I'm happy to post further information on this, or again, feel free to please give me a call and we can talk more about that.
Great, thanks. And just to reiterate, the information on the screen, if you have a question that's that maybe you don't feel comfortable having read publicly on the live call, or it's a little too complicated to really explain in a few sentences of writing, you're more than welcome to go ahead and contact Paul or Jennifer with any of those questions. We do have one for Jennifer here regarding leadership support. What should I do if my senior leadership is unsupportive? Is there anything I can do on my own?
Great question. And, from one, you're doing it. So listening in on webinars that you can get into that are free, resources are a great start. And, sometimes, like I mentioned in that leadership portion, having a stern conversation with the owner or the facility manager or whoever might be your senior manager, sometimes having that frank conversation with them to let them know what they're missing out on if they are not supporting the efforts to have, especially in getting a GFSI audit scheme in your facility, because it's marketability for your company, again, for those retailers. So you don't want to lose out on getting some of those customers. So that's a great question. And I think, Paul, maybe you have something else to add to that.
Well, it's whoever asked that question, thank you. You're not alone. This has been a real issue for a lot of companies for 10 years, ever since I've been doing this on the food side. There's several things that we can do, or that I have done, or we've done in the past. You know, if you take a look at any one of the training courses for GFSI, there are several that are, you know, 2 days, even 3 or 4 or 5 days in length, but that is not going to support you when you need to do a high level for leadership. So what we could very easily do is generate a quarter day or a half a day executive overview type training for your leadership. We can do this either in the forum that we're doing today, or once we get past the curve, we can come and do that on site for you as well. But there's other things we can do. If you feel the need that having us support you and lending our voice to yours in a meeting or talking to your team, you know, not from a sales perspective or anything like that, but just kind of sitting down and walking them through a lot of what we've talked about today, we're happy to do that and work with you and join in as kind of an SME to discuss that with your leadership. The other thing I guess I could touch on is if you look at building use cases, in other words, and there's hundreds of them online, you know, everybody that's gone through recalls to people in prison to a million other reasons why companies need to get on board with these standards, you know, but what could happen to us if we don't? In other words, what's the cost of us not implementing these programs or getting leadership support? So there's several ways that we can support that, but great question.
Great, thanks so much. We've got a lengthy, it's two separate questions that were submitted together, but I think they can be taken as one from Kenley. Kenley says, presently my company has a HACCP certification program with another CB. What is the difference if we decide to use PJRFSI as a certifying body? Additionally, if we decide to change from a HACCP certification to GFSI, what changes do we have to make? What changes do we have to make to our food safety plan and program? Sorry, it was a little disjointed.
Yeah, so I think that is a two-part question. So Jen, if you're okay, I'll let you take the second part. I'll take the first part.
Okay.
It's really, it's quite a straightforward process. You know, because HACCP and GMP, they're not accredited. There aren't a lot of, you know, specific requirements that we need to follow. It's a very simple process. You know, give me a call, I'll walk you through that. We would essentially just take over and conduct the assessment for you. But again, there's a few other things that we do a little differently. So I'd love to explain that offline and not make this, you know, into a sales pitch, but I'm happy to have that discussion with you. So just give me a call anytime.
Amy, do you mind repeating the second half of that question just to make sure that I don't overlook something?
Of course, yeah. The second half is if we decide to change from a HACCP certification to GFSI, what changes would we have to make to our food safety plan and program?
Okay, so one of the things if you're switching to a GFSI audit scheme, you need to look at each audit scheme has different guidance that they require. And so you need to download that to understand some of the requirements of the audit scheme itself. It's good to work with a consultant on that is very familiar with the type of audit scheme that you're working on. So I would suggest going that route if that's a possibility for you. And if it's not, you know, just getting a hold of that, you can, you know, you could probably contact Paul. I'm sure he'd be able to help as
Sure.
well with giving you some of that, you know, the guidance documents, because a lot of those components that I was mentioning in the GFSI requirements, I was reading through them pretty detailed in the middle of the presentation. Those are a lot of the requirements that are there. And a lot of times it's having standardized templates and a registrar of all of your different, sorry, I have another call coming soon. You know, having a register of all of your different documents that you have in place that meet the guidance requirements of that audit scheme. So it's a little complicated to be able to answer that all in a few minutes. You know, again, you're more than welcome to reach out to me or to Paul, and we can help you walk through maybe what those requirements are. And I'm happy to take that offline and have a private conversation with you.
Great, and it looks like Kenley is thanking you both for your input, so we're happy to help you, Kenley. We have a question for Paul from Martin. Martin asks, does the remote audit have the same value as a normal third-party food safety audit?
Yes, I mean, you know, absolutely. There are a lot of, you know, benefits to us being able to deliver this remotely for you. You know, we're working with a lot of clients. As I mentioned, we're currently conducting about, you know, 200 or 300 audits, but, you know, really when we're conducting a remote audit, the success of that audit really depends on the, you know, on the adequate connectivity that you have at your own location, so voice and video, to ensure that we have good communication between you and the auditor and make sure that that's stable. So that's one of the first things that we would do. Once we have the connection up and running, we'll look at the audit evidence to be collected via you know, document reviews, records review, interviewing. Depending on your company's capability, we have various other programs that we would use for either screen sharing to observe the process and activities as it's actually happening. We do that via video sharing as well, but also all evidence that is reviewed and reported to support the audit findings, that would all be done as well using remote techniques, which is all done through a secure forum. So, you know, I think that there are a lot of benefits. We have done additional webinars where we've spent an hour or longer talking just specifically about the audit process, what documents it relates to from the IAF perspective in 17021, 17026, or sorry, 065. And I know that you can access all of those on our website as well under previously recorded. But we had probably 500 or 600 companies every time we did one on the virtual audit. So yeah, please feel free to look at that, or I'm happy to send those to you as well.
Perfect. Yeah, we have had a lot of programming lately regarding those virtual audits. So definitely check out the PJR website and the PJRFSI website for those. We have a suggestion here from Faris Nouri regarding a possible webinar topic. He says, this is specific to Paul, obviously, regarding webinars. GFSI recently approved Fresh Care. Could we possibly have a webinar speaker from that scheme for an overview?
Yes, that would be good. And hello, Ferris. How are you? It's good to hear from you.
We always love hearing from Ferris.
Yes. No, I'm quite familiar with Ferris. It's great. But yeah, no, that's great. I would love to look into that for you.
Perfect.
So give me a little bit of time and I'll come back to you on that.
All right. If there's any more questions, please get those in. We've got one last question from Tina for Paul. We are a retailer, and I saw that you referenced cannabis and hemp audits. Which standards can you do this for, and where can we get more information?
Yes. Again, another great question. So we, you know, I can send over any information that you're looking for on that, but just to give you, you know, an idea, we have been working with ANSI ANAB and have submitted our standards that have been approved, and we've gone through our audits. We're waiting on our final approval for that. But essentially, we are offering their GMP HACCP style audits that are in the cannabis and hemp space. They're based on the regulatory requirements of either the province or the state as applicable. So it has those requirements in there. And currently, right now, we have 3 different sets of standards that have been published, and it's for the growers, the manufacturers, and the retailers. So, you know, that covers everything from the good agricultural practices to, you know, they're applicable for GMP, as well as you know, these could be used for first or second party assessments as well. So yeah, very, very happy to report that, and a formal press release should be coming out soon on that.
Great, thanks, Paul. If anyone has any other questions that they wanted to ask offline, go ahead and send those to Jen and Paul as you feel you'd like. But we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. Any parting words from the two of you before we end things?
Just thank you very much to Jennifer and everybody who joined us today. I think this was a great session, and we look forward to welcoming you on future ones.
Thank you. Back at you. I'm very grateful to be here. And, you know, if anyone has questions that they want to route to me about any other services that we provide, please feel free to reach out. I look forward to hearing from you. So thank you again.
Perfect. And thank you again, everybody, for attending today and some great questions on the call. As I've said before, the slides and the recording will both be available from the PJRFSI website and our YouTube channel. If you can't find them on the website, you can shoot an email to pjrfsi@pjrfsi.com or just give us a call at our headquarters. That number's right up on the screen, and we're more than happy to help you find what you need. So I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar for the day. I hope everyone has a great rest of the week, and stay healthy and stay safe out there, everyone. Thanks.